Oh, the other day, a new employee started at the place where I work as a temp, and we were discussing the wages, which are subpar. Um, they are not enough for to maintain the an acceptable standard of living. Um, Now he works in a different position than I work in, so he earns more, but still. Um, and when I mentioned about the wages, he said, "I'll take what I can get." And, this is an older guy, 4 years older than I am. Ooh, we're so old. And I didn't say anything, but I started thinking about his comment, and I felt like there's something wrong with this kind of attitude. And I've seen this kind of attitude before. I remember I had written several years ago to family and friends when I was still in Indonesia about finding a job that met my hopes and expectations. And amongst those requirements was, it was an upstanding company and certain other things where I didn't have to set aside my morals in order to work for them. And I got pushback from people about that. Pushback in the form of them saying, well, you got to set aside your morals, because they're the employer and you got to do what they want you to do. And that was so wrong on so many levels. And even people I greatly love and respect said this to me. Um, and here's whether it's wages or whether it's your morals or whatever you're talking about, um, you can't, you should not be accepting this. Okay, let me give you an example. Say you have a $500 bike and you're short on cash, really short on cash, and so you decide to sell the bike. So you put an advertisement up, and lots of people come and look at it, but nobody bites. And finally, you get a guy who says, "Well, I'm interested in this bike, but I only want to pay $20." So you haggle with the guy because there's no way you're going to take $20. I mean, that's just too low even for you. You're not, because it's not going to help you. And you know how much you need, so you haggle with the guy and get him up to $100. And that's what you actually need is $100. You were hoping for more because then you'd have some flex room, but you decide, okay, I'm going to go for $20. And I'm sorry, $100. And so you sell the bike for $100. Now this guy takes the bike, and he knows people in the biking community, so he goes to them and he finds one who buys it from him for $500. So he just made 5 times the amount that he paid you by tricking you into accepting too low of an amount. Well, not tricking really, but negotiating you into an inequitable arrangement, shall we say. And I've had that happen to me in my past where I've taken less than I should have for something. Um, and I understand that there are some people who are of low intelligence, perhaps, or have very few skills that can be traded for a good wage. But honestly, there are lots of skills out there for which you can earn good money. I mean, if you know how to cook well, you can earn good money. If you know how to clean well, you can earn good money. Um, there are many different opportunities out there if you just take the time to look. Um, what bothers me a lot and has bothered me for a long time, to be quite honest, is the outsourcing companies really take advantage of people. Now, I used to work for an outsourcing company, and this was back in 1998, I think, or until 2000. I used to work for Teletech, and they've rebranded, but they're still around. They're a big outsourcing company. They handle customer service, ordering, and technical support and stuff like that. And I worked for them and started out on one project for GTE, and then that project got moved to a different country because it was cheaper there. And then I moved to a new project for a DSL company called Clara, Covad, not COVID, Covad. And Covad went belly up in 2000 during the dot-com crash, not because they were shaky, but because a lot of investors got scared. They couldn't tell the difference between a legitimate business like Covad and an illegitimate one like all those dot-coms that precipitated the crash. But it's they were paying me, at that time, a wage that, while it was not that great, was sufficient for me as a single man to live on. It was about, I think, $28,000 at the end is what I was getting before that. And when I started, it was less than that. But I got a raise because I got promoted to being team leader, and then I got promoted to being supervisor, and did some training too. So when I was in Indonesia, I was getting paid a tiny amount of money because in Indonesia the standard of living is much cheaper than here in America. So I was considered to be rich in Indonesia, even though I was only earning the equivalent of, I believe, about at least about $800, and at most about $1,500, I believe it was, something like that. Yeah. And that sounds like a horribly tiny amount of money, but until you look at the cost of living in Indonesia, unless you're going to be going out to restaurants and stuff a lot where you're actually spending a fair amount of money, if you don't always go to the supermarkets and instead go to the traditional markets, you can get by on a small amount of money. You can probably get by on like $500 a month there, and live comfortably. You can rent a house out, and it's very cheap. So, anyways, getting back to the topic here of not taking what you can get, there are reasons for this. Now, first of all, and I think the most obvious reason for me is that the cost of living in places like America is pretty high in many areas. And to be offered, say, right now, when I came back to the U.S., I was looking for work, and I reached out to Teletech to see if they would be interested to hire me, and I discovered they were only going to pay me $10 an hour. And I was shocked, because that's basically what I had been earning when I had worked for them 20 years before. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to work for Teletech for $10 an hour. That's an insult. I've got a lot more experience now. I got a lot more skills than I did then. I'm not going to work for Teletech. And they repeatedly, different branches of Teletech sent me messages saying, hey, we want to hire you. Hey, get in touch with us. And I just ignored them all because I wasn't going to stoop that low. I wasn't going to pick up their breadcrumbs. So it was pretty disheartening, and I looked around, and there are other companies, like there's this big company that's an international hiring company called Crossover, and if you live in a country that has a low standard of living in terms of the cost, I mean, not the standard, but the cost of living is low, you can earn good money, comparatively speaking. However, if you're in America, you really would not want to work for Crossover any more than you want to work for Teletech, because they also do not offer a pay scale or pay rate that is appropriate for people living in most parts of America. And most recently, I have a friend who works for Concentrix, and Concentrix is a big outsourcing company, and he suggested I should work for them, and I was hesitant because he said that the income would be lower, but I could work my way up. But I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can maybe negotiate with them to hire me for a larger rate, because I am a skilled worker. I have strong work ethic. I'm honest, reliable, consistent. I'm not the fastest, but I do good work. And so I signed up with Concentrix. I did the typing test, aced that one, did the other two tests and aced those, and I immediately got a letter from them saying, hey, we're going to give you a verbal offer. Please join this call on this date and time, which was the next day. And I did, and it turned out that, as I was suspicious of this too, that it was actually a giant, like, not Zoom, but a giant conference call with video presentation telling about what you'd be required to do and stuff like that. And partway through, the presenter announced, oh, and the pay rate is $12.75. And $12.75 is not only less than I was earning, but I made it very clear when I applied that I would only accept the maximum amount that Concentric pays out to customer service and technical support workers. And so I privately messaged the presenter, because she was just running a pre-recorded presentation. She was just sitting in the background taking questions and stuff. And I told her this, and I said, hey, if you guys ever decide to pay a living wage, give me a call. But until then, I'm not interested. And I was very disappointed. I mean, taking a 75-cent pay cut, and then there are all the requirements that they had as far as internet and computer and all that kind of stuff. And I just felt like these outsourcing companies, quite frankly, are taking advantage of people. If you look at temp agencies, they do the same thing. So it's really. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say all outsourcing companies and all temp agencies do this, but I'm not aware of temp agencies and outsourcing companies that do not take advantage of you so they can earn money off of your work, simply by getting you put in there. And I am aware of many recruiters who have contacted me with jobs that absolutely were not a match for me and they would have known that if they bothered to look at my resume. I have, it's just, anyways. Okay, so money is the first issue, right? And the reason is pure and simple, because we are in a society, in a world that is dominated by money. And good or bad, right? It's hard to change the system, and because of human nature, there are reasons why it is kind of necessary. However, it's not the only reason that I'm opposed to taking what you can get. I'm also opposed to it because of certain types of people. Amongst those would be those who are narcissistic, monomaniacs, megalomaniacs, psychopaths, or if you want to say sociopaths, that's fine. And other types of people who tend to be arrogant and selfish and greedy, and they want more and more and more and more and more and more. These kinds of people love it when you say, I'll take what I can get, because they'll take everything they can get. And there are a huge number of companies these days that operate on the principle of let's see how much we can take from them before they won't work for us anymore. So they'll lower the pay scale as low as it'll go before people will stop applying, or they won't, or until they can't get people that are good enough quality. Also, like, I used to work for a surveying company. It was called McGuire Research Services, and they would hire drunks, they would hire drug addicts and drug pushers. I mean, when I worked there as a manager, it was like the room was just constantly a buzz with secret transactions of drugs. And but anyways, I I have been informed. Oh well, you know what? If they can do the work, we don't care what their problem is, and that's how it was. And so these people who are looking to get more money, to get more power, they will squeeze as much out of you as they can for the least amount of money that they can pay. So what does that set us up for? Think about it. If a huge swath of the workforce are being underpaid, that means there are families that have to rely on state aid, and state aid has a limited duration in most states, if not all. And in addition to that fact, that means you have to try to find nonprofits, charities that provide food and other resources like food pantries, soup kitchens, and it can be a demeaning experience for some people. I go to food pantries, I get state aid because I don't get paid enough money to support myself and my 2 children. And now you're wondering, well, why don't you just get a wife and then you have 2 incomes? Well, watch my video about that says why I'm a Volcel, and you'll find out. So what happens with these low wages is that it destabilizes entire regions where this is happening. You get a lot of people who are forced to work extra jobs. You get a lot of people who are on welfare of some form or another, and that all comes out of the taxpayer pocket. So the businesses are making they're making a lot of money, and they may not be paying their fair share because of loopholes or immunities or whatever, because of law. So the burden supporting these people who are underpaid by these companies falls on the shoulders of all of the taxpayers. Now, I'm all for civic engagement, community service, supporting others who are in trouble, but when you're squeezing people as hard as you can to get every drop of money that you can, instead of paying them what the local economy requires, you are creating a downward spiral in terms of the economic power of the community. You're also creating poverty. And on top of that, that means that you're going to have businesses that are just not going to be able to sustain themselves in the area because there's not enough excess cash in the pockets of these people and then because people are very stressed out by not having enough money, they will possibly engage in risky behavior such as alcohol abuse and drug abuse and gambling and eventually even criminal activities, robberies and thefts and muggings and all kinds of stuff. And then the gangs move in and it becomes a ghetto. So these companies that are underpaying us and using false justifications of, oh, this is economic principles, are destroying the fabric of our society. I'm happy that Amazon pays $16, $18, sometimes even more with a shift differential. And there are other companies that pay even more than Amazon does, which I think is fantastic, because those companies recognize that when you pay people a good, solid living wage that allows them to save money, and that's another thing. If you're on a minimalistic wage, how are you going to save for the future? How are you going to recover when there's an emergency? Yeah, your car breaks down, you have to go to the hospital, and you have thousands of dollars in debt suddenly, maybe tens of thousands. I have a friend that I went to high school with, and this guy is crushed by medical debt because of problems that he has. And there are many other people in the same boat, and it's because of this tendency Well, it's also because of misspending. People are not necessarily responsible with their money, but it's really a very destructive force in not just in America. Okay, this applies to all countries where people are being squeezed. Now, you may think, yeah, but the rich people, they're gonna step up and they're gonna help us out when things get really bad. Really? So when the pandemic occurred, how many of the rich families did you see stepping up and volunteering to fund everybody so that they didn't suffer? How many of those rich companies and families stepped forward and said, you know what? We don't want our employees to suffer, so we're going to continue to pay them even though they can't come into work? How many of those companies and people made any real effort to actually helping us during the pandemic when people were going nuts in their homes because they couldn't do anything? And I'm not just talking about America, I'm talking about around the world. I talked to people in other countries. They were talking about how people, the problems that people were having with higher divorce rates, higher drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and higher rates of abusing spouses and abusing children, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of divorce, and so on and so forth. How many of these rich people step forward? Well, here's the thing. I was reading an article in a Smithsonian magazine from several years back, and it was about a man who had done some research because he had the same belief that the rich people, when things get rough, are going to step up and be good members of society. What he discovered was, through researching historically, at least I think it was focused in Europe and America, but what he discovered is that when things got bad, the rich people got worse, not better. The rich people would step on everybody and take advantage of the situation. So if food was not available, they would sell food because they could get it with the huge reserves of money that they had. They could get it very easily. But they would sell it to their neighbors, their poor neighbors, and they would charge them huge sums of money. And if that person didn't have any money, they would say, "Oh, well, that's okay. Give us your property, and we'll give you the food." So people would lose their land to these greedy rich people who were taking advantage of a famine or a drought or other circumstances whereby there was great insecurity. They didn't step up and help because they don't operate on idealistic principles. They don't operate on true philanthropy. They don't operate on altruism. They operate on, we're going to get the maximum that we can get every time. And if that makes somebody suffer, tough for them. That is the attitude of the dynasties that you see in your country. And when I say dynasties, I mean the families that have existed for generation after generation after generation, getting richer and richer and richer. Rockefellers, Kennedys, Carnegies, Chase, Rothschild, and all these other families, they have lived by sucking our blood. And when things get rough, they suck even more of it. They take advantage of the situation. This is psychopathic behavior. These people are sick. And I know there are people out there that aren't going to like what I'm saying, and I don't really give a shit. Okay? You gotta stop taking what you can get. You gotta start standing up and saying, you know what? I'm only going to take this much. Nothing less. You cannot expect us to continue to live on a wage that forces us to be financially insecure until we die. It's not right. Okay? And I hate to say this, but and I could be wrong, okay? I admit this is possible that I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the society that we have, at least here in America, with a false democracy, which is really a plutocracy run by that's controlled by the psychopaths. It seems to me that a democracy with a capitalistic system promotes encourages and develops psychopathic business tendencies. Um, what I'm seeing in companies is disturbing, and people are telling me it's gotten this way. Companies don't care about their employees anymore, and I'm sure there are companies out there that do care. Okay, I mean, I can't believe that only companies that are psychopathic still exist. Um, but the number of companies that actually show their true concern for the employees, that pay them right and give them good benefits and stuff, is decreasing. The company that I'm temping at, yeah, they pay the minimum. And it hurts. I mean, it hurts me because I have to be on state aid and go to food pantries. It hurts my coworkers. They don't feel valued. They're disgruntled. They don't want to be there anymore. And the way they get ignored and demeaned sometimes is bad. So my point, I hope, has been made perfectly clear. You shouldn't be taking the least amount available. If you see a company offering a small amount of money, just walk away. I know that you're hurting. I know you need a job and stuff, but walk away. Okay? Because these companies don't care about you. They don't care that you will not be able to retire when it's retirement age. They don't care that there might not be Social Security, and that's a shame. But they don't care about any of that. So walk away. Now, if you're in an unenviable position where you just have to get some money coming into the house, that's okay. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm currently looking for better work. And I've got a job offer that I just, like I said, I turned down Concentrics, but I've got another company that's looking at me right now. Um, but what I'm saying is if you are desperate for money, take the job short term, but every day when you're done, go home and look for another job. Look for a better job. Keep on moving yourself up. Don't, and here's a kind of a trap that you might fall into. You might fall into go into a place like where I work, where the people pretty much get along very well, and the management is hands off for the most part. So you're left to they I guess you could say trust you, or they don't care to do your work right, and you get along with everybody, and it's a nice place to be because you get along with everybody. There's lots of joking, like at where I work, and it's good camaraderie, not friendship, but camaraderie. Okay, don't fall into that trap. I almost fell into that trap. They offered me a job. They were so impressed with me that they offered me a job, and they promised me, oh, we're going to buy off your temp agency's contract for you, and and the pay will be the same, but you'll have benefits from us after, what was it, 60 days or 90 days or something like that, and so on and so forth. And I was really thinking about taking that job, and then it turned out that they weren't going to pay the temp agency's contract off because they hadn't bothered to find out how much they would have to pay. But even worse, here's the worst part of it. If they had come back to me and said, Glenn, the director who made this promise to me, if he had come back to me and said, Glenn, I'm really sorry. I know I promised that we would pay off your contract, but I did not take the time to look first to see how much it would cost. And you have over 500 hours left, probably 600 hours that have to be paid off at the rate that we pay them, and we just can't swing that. It's not that we don't want you to be part of our team. It's not that we don't value you, but it's a lot of money. And they're a stingy company. I mean, very stingy. But if he had come to me and said, I'm really sorry and we can't do that, I would understand. But he didn't say anything. And I had to find out from one of my coworkers that they weren't going to do it, and that I was granted permission to do overtime, and then there was a big hullabaloo about that. But so anyways, don't take the minimum. Take it temporarily, but move on. Because companies that don't pay enough, if you stick around or if you take the job, you're encouraging them to continue to pay people less than what they should be getting, and that's not good. All right. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching today, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a better job.